So creating that space through breathing into my lower belly in a fantastic way, through even closing my eyes and asking myself the question, where is this coming from? Or story that I'm telling myself. That's a profound question as well. What is the story that I'm telling myself in this moment? And whatever story comes up, then myself, how true is the story? Is the story actually truth? Or is it something that's been recreated through my memory bank in my brain? Is it something that's been recreated from a past experience? That's obviously triggering. If you want to get real, I'm triggering my amygdala right now. Therefore, I'm not thinking clearly, right? So I'm triggering my fear region. And that's very just understanding the more that I actually remind myself of that. Not instantly I will shift. However, over time I will.
Hey everyone, my name is Sarah and welcome to Her Ascension Story, the podcast that proves the world is transformed by every hero's personal adventure. Here we talk about the real and the raw things that we should all be talking about more. So if you want to be a part of the movement of getting real about the deeper, more meaningful things about life, be sure to subscribe and follow and get ready to get real. My hope is that this platform inspires you to explore and expand new empowering beliefs about yourself so you can make your own impassionate impact too. And those three pillars, inspiration, independence, and impact, aren't just the premise for this podcast, but for my work too. If you want to check out that more, be sure to go to herascensionstory.com or check me out on social media at Her Ascension Story. Welcome back, everyone. I am so in love with today's episode. Today's guest is Kieran Hedley, who is an anxiety coach from New Zealand studying medical neuroscience. He's worked with people from multiple countries to guide them to overcome anxiety naturally so that they can embody self-confidence, peace, and joy. And I can personally attest to this because I have worked with Kieran kind of through sort of mentorship or coaching, a short little program that he was offering, and I got a ton of value from it, and it was really shifting in terms of mentally, but also in a deep soul level way. So this episode just goes right into the deep things before we even started recording the actual episode. So you guys are going to get kind of a behind the scenes look at, what conversations are like before I get into actual episode recordings. And since it was so good, we just thought that we would continue right into actually doing the episode. So I hope you guys enjoy it. Let's get right into it. It's really awesome to hear you say that you can keep finding that stillness and that balance throughout all the changes, because that's the one thing. When you're going through change, I feel like time just keeps speeding up, and it's so hard to find your grounding and to actually stay present in that flow.
Yes, for sure. There's a lot of forward momentum, therefore forward looking. Very difficult to add in the reflection processes when the novelty and the newness is present. And so it's quite. I think it's definitely a skill to be built, because I don't feel like it's quite natural to actually constantly take those pauses when there's novelty, because novelty definitely stimulates that part of the brain that is about adventure and exploration. So it's like this creative side of the brain that's constantly thinking about what's next, and pause and then actually take that time to act as sort of out of nature. So it's quite nice to be able to practice skill and actually feel the benefits of it, rather than in the past it was this dopamine crash. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely.
It's nice.
Oh, I definitely love this science. I didn't know that you were actually studying medical neuroscience, so I love how you actually put in all the good bits about the neurotransmitters and the actual science behind it. That's actually how I'll probably introduce you in the episode, just how you really base the wellness aspects around science and in such a grounded way. Of course it's spiritual to be to have mindfulness and everything. You have to really connect with your soul, but at the same time you really make it just so logical and grounded and healthy. Like it feels like there's no pressure. I feel
Mm,
like a lot of people are like, oh, that's not for me. I'm not very spiritual, but you
I
really
see what
make
you
it
mean.
well rounded and open for people.
No, I appreciate it a lot. Yeah, it's definitely something that I approached with that perspective myself when it came to understanding mindfulness and spirituality for myself. It came from this place of being skeptical myself. So because I had experience of having that skepticism, uh, I also came to understand that a lot of other people had that. So even though I was into spirituality quite head first, actually, as soon as I saw the source of science behind it, I'm like, yeah, let's go. So I dived into it. And then from there, because I dived head first, I just thought others might do that too. So I started actually speaking about spirituality in just a very grounded way, but not very scientific. I didn't bring much logic into it. And it was only once I started to actually have conversations with people about some of the work that I was doing where whenever I did bring in that logical standpoint, there was this resonance. And when I saw that resonance and that connection that they made, it helped me reflect on myself of having that experience as well, of slowly being introduced to spirituality and mindfulness. So that's definitely why I brought it in a lot more. And that's why actually I decided to study a uh, more, how would you say it, a more structured certification around medical neuroscience rather than actually, just doing my own study, which was nice. But it's nice to have something sort of in the back end that's been structured around uh, the brain and then being able to actually tie that into mindfulness, which is cool.
Yeah, I
Mm.
love it. It's like you're balancing. I feel like that might actually be the sweet spot. It's balancing the yin and the yang, like the mind and the soul and the science, like the logic and that intuition, the soul aspect. Is that something that you sort of feel in it, or?
Mm. Yeah, totally, totally. I totally feel that. The interesting thing is, I feel like there's um, sides without the other have their own limitations. Like I feel like the spiritual aspect can have the limitation in terms of it comes away from logic. It's beautiful. However, in terms of relatability, there's definitely a logical standpoint that the modern world seemingly almost needs. And then from the logical standpoint, because it's logical, it's filtered through memory, it's filtered through knowledge rather than filtered through truth, whereas spirituality is just looking at the truth. The scientific side is only limited to knowledge, it's limited to memory, it's limited to what has been studied because there's limitless things that haven't been studied. So that's the issue with science, is it's only limited to that point. So like 10 years ago, they didn't even think neuroplasticity was a possibility. They didn't even think it was a thing because it hadn't been studied in the right circumstances. And 10 years ago, when they actually finally made the discovery, now they're realizing that there's even such thing as adult neuroplasticity. So meaning over 35, which originally had thought it was impossible to change pathways in the 35-year-old or anyone older than that, realizing that, yeah, it's 100% possible. It's a lot of work. It's 100% possible. It's real cool to see that. And it's really actually the benefits of meditation. It's recent, right? Benefits of even breathing exercises, certain uh, yoga flows, even certain, I'm trying to remember the word. Can't quite remember the word. But yeah, basically it's really cool to see the overall breathing techniques and the thousands of years old visualization practices that are coming in, and they're actually seeing benefits with that. And that's recent stuff, right? In the past, it would have been brushed off and laughed at because it wasn't scientific. So it's crazy how it's only because it's been studied and be like, oh, wow, it actually works. I'll actually do it. So,
Right?
yeah.
Do you feel, you said that you were skeptical of diving into it all in the beginning. Do you feel like some of that skepticism came from sort of like a like-minded aspect from that, from just like, oh, well, this stuff isn't really proven, or like it's not tangible, or I can't, it's like not concrete or anything like that? Or where did the skepticism actually come from?
I feel like it came from experience. So because it wasn't in my experience, was one. So because I hadn't actually, first of all, actually myself, nor had I given it the opportunity. And coming from this, it was definitely an egotistical standpoint of know best. And I was too afraid to acknowledge that what I had been doing for so long, putting so much energy into this way of healing myself, which was fitness, health, right? So physical stuff, physical health, physically pushing myself, writing about gratitude, which actually writing about gratitude does have effect, not as much as some other gratitude practices, which we can definitely talk about. And just certain things that I've been implementing have been improved, and I wasn't willing to acknowledge that. And because of that, I was limiting myself, my capabilities to improve and to, because I'd seen results, and because I'd seen results there, I said to myself, this is the best way. And on that egotistical standpoint, that definitely gave me this sense of, I don't know if you know much about the Tony Robbins, he talks about one of the 6 needs being significance, which I completely resonate with. Significance as a human, we'll find significant perform, whether it's through learning a language, learning a skill, being right all the time, right? Or, going to the good body, whatever that is, something that stands out, something that makes me feel significant in some shape or form, something makes me different. And that for me is what the significant aspect was, is I clung on to this aspect of needing to know. And if I challenged my stern belief, then that was an issue. And I would neglect that and reject that. So coming from, I feel completely opposite to that, is I feel very open-minded. I mean, I'm sure there's different within myself that are still quite closed off. So still constantly working on that. And yeah, there's definitely, of course, points for sure. However, just being aware of that has allowed me to come away from that biasness, come away from that ego a little bit more, which has allowed me to be a bit more free, to not only learn more, but to grow myself more into since my ability to know how things were was also my biggest weakness, which is crazy when I think about it, because I thought it was my biggest strength. Like, yeah, I'm so smart, I know this. I'd studied so much in terms of looking at the papers and a lot of the science behind certain things revolving around physical and mental health, since I was so engrossed in both of those worlds, loved them so much still. However, it was just such from a place of needing to know to stroke my ego, and that rather than coming to a place of, okay, this is a solution, this is a answer, it's not the solution, it's not the answer. Applying that to everything, even with everything that I know today, everything that I'm studying in medical neuroscience, everything that a doctor or a physician will tell me, even then, it's coming to that place of I still don't know, but this is my understanding, and this is what I do know so far. There's still more there, and there always is, because science is always changing. So even what they're teaching in the medical books now compared to even it's already different. It's crazy how quickly it's evolving, and how quickly a lot of modern science, a lot of Eastern medicine is into modern science now to actually be proven, which is crazy, right? So even then, that's just simply someone's experience. It doesn't need to be the way, and it isn't necessarily the way. So yeah, it's definitely allowed me to, being able to step back from that ego has allowed me to not just be able to grow more in that space, but as well, it's allowed me to step more into the coaching role that I'm so in love with. It allowed me to as well help other people to step into their own healing. So it's been a really beautiful process for me. The ability to come away from ego has consequently actually allowed others to grow even further than what they if I hadn't. So it's been beautiful.
Yeah, definitely. I love that. So I feel like we're actually in a pretty good flow, so we can actually just keep going.
Oh,
I'll,
cool.
Do your bio and everything like that
Yeah,
before,
love that.
if that works for you.
Yeah, totally. I felt it. I'm like, oh, yeah, okay, let's just go.
Okay.
So
All
yeah,
right.
yeah.
Sounds good. So you said that, you're still in the process. I mean, you've opened up a lot, but you're still in the process of opening up some closed things, in your mind or in your experiences, and in your life. So what have been the biggest obstacles that prevent you from opening up, and how have you coped with that to cultivate more awareness?
Great question. So firstly, I feel like the learning to open up and the learning to delve even deeper is a never-ending process. I feel like they'll never end. And the day that I say I'm done, or the day that I say I'm healed, I'm lying to myself. It's like another limitation there. So I feel like that's a constant process on its own, but that's beautiful, because that means that I get to always grow. I get to always progress. And if I didn't get to always grow and progress, and just to link back to Tony Robbins, just because I did his Unleash Your Power Within course over the weekend, so it's fresh in my mind. One of his other human needs that he speaks on is growth, and it makes a lot of sense. I'm very hesitant to say that growth is happiness. However, it's definitely a assistance, a form that's assisting in happiness. So I believe that happiness can come from progression, as long as that is something that someone's practiced and learned how to do and program within themselves. I really feel that when it came to the understanding that there's always areas to grow, there's areas to expand on, and always more areas to dive deeper on, because there's only so much that I've learned about myself. That to grow constantly. That means I get to learn constantly. That means I'm always in a space of expansion. Because an interesting factor when it comes to what a human feels that they need in order to feel safe or to feel well, there's two factors that there's always seemingly, if you really observe a human, they'll always seek these two factors, really dumb everything down into two basic needs. And one is security, that can resemble different needs within that. Then one is so of course, if a human doesn't feel secure, there's this constant factor of overthinking. The amygdala in the brain, which is a fear region in the brain, very active, constantly active. If there's any sense of insecurity, when there's insecurity, the amygdala is active. And when the amygdala is active, searching for new things to bring in that safety from an external place. So whether that's roaring into their room, into themselves, whether that's needing to control another person to feel safe, whether that's needing to fill their belly in order to feel safe, right? The amygdala will do crazy things in order to make them feel safe, whether it's they can deactivate the hippocampus, which is the memory section of the brain, and allowing themselves to get into that, or it's seeming fixation, but obviously more problematic. So there's this interesting factor that goes on. And so security is such a basic need, yet without expansion, it's interesting how security is the act of putting walls up, and expansion is the act of pulling walls down. So it's like there's this paradoxical experience, always needing to withdraw, close themselves off, and then always needing to expand. And this is what I've really noticed as well within myself, is this place of, this is still something I struggle with as well, which is finding that, and we were speaking on this before, that balance of finding that forward momentum, which is the expansion, and at the same time finding that stillness, which brings a sense of security, right? So it's definitely a really interesting place where I feel I've been struggling still a little bit. And really to that factor of, I mean, if we were to give an example around expansion, it's like this. If we were to put whoever's listening into a small 4x4 box, right? They're going to feel very, of course, oppressed, suppressed. They're going to feel very tight, imprisoned. They're going to, very secluded. They're just going to want to get out, basically. And now we liberate them and we say, yeah, you're moving to a 10x10 box. Let's upgrade you. You're upgrading your prison cell, right? They're going to feel liberated. They're going to be like, yeah, awesome. I get more space. So much space for activities. And they get this 10x10 space, which is fantastic. So they get to expand, which is great. But then all of a sudden, within a few hours, they're going to hit a ceiling. They're still imprisoned. They're still in this secure box where they can't get up. So they're feeling stuck, this need to expand. So eventually we liberate them after a day and we get into a 50x50 box. All of a sudden, holy crap, I've just 5 times my space. This is insane. So all of a sudden they're running around, they're celebrating, right? They're so stoked. Yet after some time, they're going to feel imprisoned. They're going to feel stuck. They're going to feel like they need to expand, because every single human has this in them. This feeling of whenever they reach a ceiling, a roof, or whatever it is, some sort of barrier, they want to break it. Yet at the same time, they want you to feel secure and safe. So it's a battle of needing to put these walls up and building their own walls, their own prison in a way, if we choose that. And they're building to keep them safe, to keep things out. Yet all of a sudden, by keeping things out and building those walls, now I've imprisoned myself. So now, although I've set up boundaries, as the modern world calls it, which is fantastic, so healthy and so good to do, and still, however, these boundaries are things that need to be learnt to be not attached with. And that's another thing that I've been struggling with myself as well. When I set up boundaries, I find myself attaching myself still to these boundaries. So these are just some of the struggles I'll still have as well. So that's why I'm explaining them in a more in-depth way. And certain boundaries, more so in romantic relationships, where I'll set up, it becomes so attached to it that if that doesn't actually follow through, I suffer, rather than being able to simply communicate it in a compassionate way and then resolving it. Because, of course, naturally, when there's another person involved, miscommunication is a common thing, and it's a natural thing, a natural process, since I've got my own mind, my own impressions. They've got their own mind, their own impressions, their own experiences. Therefore, the way I communicate something is always going to be received a different way. I understand it. What I do, even if I communicate it in the most beautiful way, there's always going to be a subtle shift in the way it's received. And that's okay. It's fixing that. So coming to that place, that's still something that I actually find a little bit of battle with. So these are certain areas that are sort of there. There's this struggle around attachment to boundaries. This also struggle around growth, stillness. So in other words, expansion and security. And still really deepening in that. And actually, I'd like to actually even share something that I have struggled with up until fairly recently, which is the willingness and ability to share with others struggles on social media in an in-depth way. Doesn't say that I've sorted it out. It's so much easier to talk about this used to be me, or this has happened, but now I'm healed, or now I'm good, right? And even though that's still hard, and for a lot of people, I've done it for a long time, so naturally, of course, it becomes a little bit normal. However, the identity, this is another thing that I was working on, is the an identity around being a coach, or an identity around being eligible, or an identity around being manly. And that's another big thing, especially with men nowadays, especially here in New Zealand. Of course, anywhere else in the world is the same, I'm sure. There's this identity of being a certain way. And of course, forging an identity is healthy. However, forging a that I'm attached to is not. Because the moment that identity is challenged because someone sees me a different way, and of course, naturally, this is this idea of what if this person thinks, or if that identity is challenged because the external doesn't produce itself in the way that reflects it. For example, if I say I'm manly and then someone else seems more manly to me, of course, there's this insecurity. However, if I don't have that identity at all, and I come to the place of I am simply life, my identity is cosmic, which is a very East, which is a beautiful concept, and I love that, then all of a sudden there's no actually room for insecurity, because there's no identity to be challenged. Very hard idea to come by. However, if we just really break that down in the brain and look at the idea that if the hippocampus is a reflection of where a lot of the memory gets stored, of course there's many other areas, but hippocampus is one of the main regions. The amygdala right next to the hippocampus, in fact, this tiny little almond shaped, so it's easy to remember, amygdala, almond, right? There. And that's a fear region of the brain. So it's like this tiny little almond-shaped area that's right next to the region, and it affects the emotions that are experienced through past memories. So, for example, if I experienced, and I got this on my Instagram today, which was if I experienced my partner speaking to another guy, and this is something that I actually have improved a lot on, and this is something that I actually don't find I experience much in these situations anymore. There's still actually times when I'll feel this, so I just want to be completely open there, which is jealousy. And it's jealousy when we'll be having a conversation with another guy, and there's this feeling of, because the in my past which reflected that person leaving me, or that person choosing another guy over me, it will happen again. And that's what the hippocampus does, because the moment that memory, which is stored in my hippocampus, is triggered from a situation I might see in front of me. Because this is happening, therefore the story that's stored in my memory region bank is being projected onto this situation. So it creates a conclusion. So because this memory had a previous fearful experience tied to it, or previous painful experience tied to it, naturally the gets stimulated. So if we want a memory to come up that doesn't actually bring projections or over, then we want to destimulate the amygdala. So whenever the amygdala is stimulated because a past experience has been linked to one, right? And a great way to know that is if I feel triggered when an experience happens, if anxiety, fear, worry, sadness, confusion, stuckness, whatever it is that comes up, it's a trigger. And if that ever comes up, then I know, it's going to know, even if I don't know what it is exactly, that there's obviously a memory that has been painful in my past that's reflected this before. And what they found in neuroscience, which is really interesting, I'm just going to drop this in, as they sort of studied over 10 years of understanding neuroplasticity in a deeper way, is they actually started to realize that people recreate unresolved trauma within their lives. So for example, if in the past they had been cheated on, constantly actually recreate those situations unconsciously in their lives so that they can actually solve it within their moment, within their present tense. However, a lot of people aren't conscious of this process happening, which is why it's such a triggering experience, scary experience, and such a stuck experience of, why is this happening? Well, why do I keep finding people that leave me or cheat on me or whatever it is? The cycle happens because of the lack of understanding around that conscious aspect of, this is because the brain is actually trying to recreate moments and situations so that I can actually resolve them, so that I can heal that past experience, so that amygdala no longer gets stimulated, so I can be free of that. So it's actually the brain helping us in a way. We're just not aware of it. And we're seeing that as something that is happening to us. So that's something that is very interesting around coming to that understanding of, well, if I can stimulate the amygdala, that fear region in the brain, and see things a lot more clearly, and as more so as they are, rather than from a that's been filtered through a past experience, then I can see things as they are, and then no longer that trigger will occur. So therefore that jealousy will occur because I see simply my partner speaking to a guy. That's it. I don't see my partner speaking to a guy, therefore it will happen, or therefore she will leave me, or therefore she would cheat on me. I just simply see my partner speaking to a guy. And then that's it. There's no attached. There's no just as it is. So to actually be able to step into that ability away from identity, that ability to come away from triggering experiences, there's really two things that's needed. And of course, this is just one way. This is just the way that I've been really stepping into more lately than because in the past I'd step into it away and learning to sit with it so I can change my relationship with it, which is absolutely powerful, and I still do that. However, there's a new way that I've been utilizing more, and I find it actually more effective in a quicker way, which is actually to shift myself within this situation so I can change my relationship with it. So as an example, if I see a partner speaking to a guy and I feel triggered, the first thing to be done is create a distance between the and the response. So if I can create the distance between the stimulus and the response, instantly I feel jealous. That's right. And then I act from that place of jealousy, which is maybe I withdraw, I run away, I quickly go get her, quickly go do something. I make sure that I'm watching the situation with like my eyes peeled, right? Whatever that is. It's a response. So if there's space between what I feel and what I do, that actually increases the amount of security my brain learns to feel. For one, even though I might be panicking, it's just creating space. So creating that space through breathing into my lower belly in a holistic way, through even closing my eyes and asking myself the question, where is this coming from? Or the story that I'm telling myself. That's a profound question as well. What is the story that I'm telling myself in this moment? And whatever story comes up, then ask myself, how true is the story? Is the story actually truth? Or is it something that's being recreated through my memory bank in my brain? Is it something that's been recreated from a past experience That's obviously triggering. If you want to get real, I'm triggering my amygdala right now. Therefore, I'm not thinking clearly, right? So I'm triggering my fear region, and that's very just understanding. The more that I actually remind myself of that, not instantly I will shift. However, over time I will. And it's just understanding that neuroplasticity isn't an overnight process, although it's been shown at times people can change their pathways within 2 hours. But that takes a really stimulating experience. The only way to do that is through more so a negative experience. So if someone comes and yells at me, within 2 hours, my brain will actually shift in a way where a new pattern of if I hear loud noises, I might get right. So that might be like a new meaning to loud noises. Or if someone starts to walk towards me quickly and is raising their voice, not good enough, right? Whatever that meaning is that I get to it, I attach to it, will be the neuroplasticity that happens within 2 hours. However, most of the time, it takes a very long time, and there's no actual like real average time because it depends on how focused I am. Plasticity, the first focus, and deep focus. It's deep focus. That's how neuroplasticity is stimulated. But it's not created, it's stimulated because it's created the second step, which I'll say in a second. So in order for me to shift my experience with this relation, for example, to when my partner talks to a guy, the first thing that I'm going to need to do is I'm going to need to create that space, which is the space between stimulus and response. The second thing I want to do is question it, because that's what a space. And the third thing is I actually want to change my physiology, because the physiology is actually the quickest way to change the relationship to what's going on. It's the quickest way to actually change what's happening within my body. And it's the quickest way to actually shift what's in my brain. So a great way to do that is, like I said earlier, take some deep breaths. So actually deep in the lower belly, not of course upper chest as we know, and deep nasal breaths. And a great way to do this is a fantastic form of pranayama proven, which is ujjayi breathing. And ujjayi breathing is, if you imagine like it's been a really hot summer day and you have some ice cream or you have a really cold drink and you just make that refreshing, relaxing noise, like a sigh, sort of like feels good. So ujjayi breathing is taking that from the mouth into the nose and it's shifting it. When I do breathe through the nose, it's now, instead of, which is pushing the air, it's actually allowing the air to flow. So the air starts to flow, tickling the back of my throat, which is a lot of parasympathetic nerve endings actually reside, which stimulates my rest and digest system. So it's the fact that I'm breathing into my lower belly, it's that I'm stimulating these nerve endings, which you also have them on your lips as well. So if you rub your lips for a little bit, you can sometimes feel stimulated or relaxed. Parasympathetic nerve endings are in your lips as well. So when you kiss someone, maybe you feel relaxed or excited or whatever that is. De-stress you, real interesting little thing there. And if you shift that breath from the mouth to the nose and put the tongue to the middle and the roof of your mouth, is a great way to sort of learn how to do this. It's not necessary, but it definitely helps. All of a sudden it shifts from pushing and sucking to actually allowing the air to flow, and it expands the lung capacity in those moments. It actually helps open up those areas in the abdomen, which is really interesting. So no, it's no longer, it's now. And that's all through the nose. So by doing that, it allows me to stimulate that parasympathetic nervous system. It takes me out of the fight or flight sympathetic system, which allows me to change my physiology, therefore my chemistry. Another thing I can do as well as shifting my breath is shifting my posture. So lifting my chin slightly, having a slight smile on my face, which actually will help stimulate a little bit of dopamine. Dopamine is a resemblance of forward momentum. It's actually more about forward momentum than reward, which is really interesting. Reward's a factor, it's definitely a reward transmitter. However, it's actually more around, from that reward, allowing myself to like more forward momentum. So that's what dopamine represents. So it's not getting dopamine, serotonin confused. So through dopamine, by stimulating that actually stimulates this idea of forward momentum, which actually helps stimulate plasticity. So a slight smile on my face, into my lower belly, shoulders relaxed and back, chest up slightly, so open my chest, and standing up straight. And these are poses. You can even put your hands on your hips. It's been shown at Harvard University, they did a study, hands on your hips actually increases your testosterone by something like 30% within 2 minutes, decreases cortisol by something like 30 or 40%. I can't remember the exact numbers, it's somewhere around there. And in doing so, it decreases my overall stress and increases my overall sense of empowerment. So in those moments now, when I'm actually in this moment where I'm triggered, if I've shifted my physiology, I've created space between stimulus and response, now I'm completely changing my relationship, learning to change my relationship with the situation, right? So it's coming away from thoughts just for a moment. Doesn't necessarily mean I need to store, right? Because it's going to happen whether I want it or not. But it's just understanding that if I just come away from it for a moment, understanding it's still going to happen, I shift my physiology, I create that space, I ask those questions. From there, I just come to a place of acceptance, and that's not actual experiential acceptance, because I can't just decide, okay, I accept this. Screw my trauma. That doesn't exist anymore, right? It's not quite that easy, as much as I wish it was. But it's actually allowing me to shift that, coming to a place of acceptance of, okay, what can I do in this moment to learn to accept the situation more so as it is? And it's just asking those questions and exploring what comes up. So that's the first step. The first, like I said, focus. And that's deep, intense focus on those aspects. It's very tiring, by the way, and it's the last thing the brain will want to do. So it takes a lot of discipline and consciousness to do that. Step is actually rest. So neuroplasticity doesn't happen within the action. It actually happens when we sleep or in a place of rest. So when I go to stillness, and this is where stillness does come in, is now when I go to stillness and I meditate, or I practice my breathing, or I do yoga, and then move to stillness, whatever that is, that's when neuroplasticity, actually, the new pathways start to form, the new neurons start to grow and create new connections. So when this is occurring, and when I wake up in the morning, it's shifted. That's why when people are studying for and they wake up and they remember a whole lot, it's because neurons, new pathways are being built overnight when they're sleeping. So a great way, a little tip and trick if people are studying for anything, is to actually constantly come to stillness 20 to 30 minutes and just pause and not focus on what they're trying to remember, not focus on that speech that they're trying, not focus on the thing they're studying, not focus on whatever they're working on, whatever that is, just for a couple of minutes and pause completely and breathe, be still, relax as much as possible. And this is where the new pathways begin, and then get back to the stimulus. So balance between stimulus and stillness is very powerful for creating new pathways, and that's a big factor that I've been working on for myself, and I'm still working on, because there's still moments where I'll react to a situation. I'm absolutely human, so I absolutely do this still, which is I'll still react, and I'll still not focus on the space between stimulus and response. I'll still not focus on still not shift my physiology, and I'll still fall into that. And it's just being compassionate to myself for that. So yeah, that's a very long answer, very short question. Yeah.
No, I really love it because, okay, I don't know how to exactly word this, so I'm just going to try to say it and see if it comes out right. So it really seems like these processes really help to blend into like almost a Buddhist way, like the middle way of not going over into science and not going over into spirituality. Like when I teach yin yoga, I teach the Ujjayi breathing, and I tell the students how it really activates the parasympathetic nervous system. And, it's only 5 minutes into the practice and students are already yawning, and you really help yourself like rest. And then that's what, the PNS is all about. But then once you're in that rest state, you really begin to meditate and you focus, and then you begin to repattern all the way down to like a soul level. So when you come back to saying how we unconsciously recreate these unresolved experiences in our life, and it's really like the amygdala helping us, it seems like, to actually learn these soul lessons. Like our
Mm.
biology kind of knows this bigger soul experience that we have in life to actually keep learning and keep experiencing until we really nail the lesson and kind of grow through that. And of course, there's always different levels of the lessons, right?
Yes.
But then we can actually, I don't know, it just sounds so interesting how you, it sounds like to me, you just explained the biology and the chemistry and just the pure science behind a soul's journey in life.
Yeah. Yeah. In a way, I mean, there's 100% other ways. And of course, neuroplasticity does have rules. Yet, even within those rules, there's always exceptions. Always realizing there's exceptions. So those are just the rules that scientists have come to, neuroscientists have come to. Always exception in science. So it's coming to that, yeah, place of, although these are definitely quote unquote rules, right? I want to put them in all quotation marks. There's never like set rules here. It's coming to the understanding that there's always exceptions. So some people would be able to create that all through stillness without any action at all. And all that's required is for them to uh, come to a place of compassion and peace within themselves. Already prepped their state before a situation might happen because they're in a higher, more energetic state. Their ability to respond to that situation will already be shifted compared to someone that's just in their natural state, therefore more likely to. So because they're in a much less trigger possible state, already they're shifting their experience with something that previously would have created that big trigger. Thus, they're creating new patterns there, and within that, of course, the required for those new neurons to grow. That is definitely something that is needed. However, the understanding that the method need to be that exact one way, and one fantastic way actually is, I'd love to give an example of an experience I had when it comes to reprogramming, which is I had an experience in Bali where I was actually doing some physical work, and it's not allowed, that's illegal. And I was doing some waterfall meditation retreats, and I didn't really think much of it at the time. My friends said I should do it, so I'm like, yeah, it's a great idea. So I did that, and I was desperate at the time in terms of finances. I wasn't really doing well business wise back then, and actually shifting some of my focus to something that would allow not just bring a little bit more income in, but do something that I really enjoyed, which was actually taking people to waterfalls and meditating, which is so much fun. Mm. And doing that, it created this fear, this worry. If I get caught by anyone that doesn't want me to do that, I will not only get kicked off the island, I would out on the island for possibly 10 years, and I could possibly be fined $20,000. And that for me, in my mind, of course, the story, that would have been the end, right? That would be the end of everything. Like, I want to be in Bali so bad. And I can't, $20,000. That's insane. US as well. That's like 30,000 or 28,000 New Zealand roughly. And it just blew my mind to that idea. So all of a sudden this fear became overwhelming. And I fell into this deep space of anxiety and worry those moments. And although I felt more calmer about it than I would have maybe a year ago, because this happened at the start of the year, this was definitely an experience that brought a lot of fear, because to me, the story was, if this happens, this is the end, right? And of course, that's definitely a story that you can fall into, and something as simple if my girlfriend talks to this guy, life will end, right? Or if my business brings in this much money, life will be over. Or if my friend doesn't want to hang out with me today, life will be over even, right? So like, all these crazy stories can lead to life will be over. So dark. But it's absolutely a natural process, and that's okay to have that. I've had that, and like these things I'm saying are literally things I've had as well, so that's why I'm saying them. But this was definitely one where it came so strongly of will be over if I don't figure this out. So what I did instead was, after about 12 hours of actually feeling the emotions of doubt, worry, I actually had a normal day, even though that was really hard. I challenged myself and I told myself I'm going to face fully, face this from a place of compassion and from a place of high energy, not low energy, which is what I'm so desperately almost wanting to fall into because I'm wanting to withdraw. So I challenged myself and I did it. It's great. I celebrated that. And came the afternoon and I decided, okay, enough. I am literally not seeing any progress for me feeling this way, and nor is it going to help me resolve this at all. So I'm going to shift this right now. And that's an interesting thing when it comes to people when they want to change but they don't feel motivated to. The quickest way to actually change something is to get more real with the cost than the worth. So what I mean by that in that moment, which was I got real with the fact that if I stay this way, this will cause me more issues in exact ways. So specificity is so key here. In exact ways, which was it's going to take so much away from me in terms of my happiness of my day. If I take away that happiness, it's going to decrease my ability to actually earn money. It's actually going to decrease my ability to show up for clients. It's going to decrease my ability to help others. It's going to decrease my ability to be loving to those that I love. And possibly I might even triggered around those that I love and hurt them. I was getting really real with that. So getting real with the cost of saying the same is more powerful. Always do more for to avoid those costs than they will do to actually gain something. So if I was getting real with the fact that if I change, I'll feel better, that's actually not going to be very motivating. So because the brain will always seek what's comfortable, not what feels good. The brain's programmed for survival, not happiness. So the brain's programmed for survival, not happiness, because at the end of the day, we are animals. And I need to learn to figure out how to actually teach my brain so that it wants happiness, right? And the best way to do it is get really real with the cost of not doing that. Because again, the brain will always do more to avoid pain than it will to get. So I got really real with the cost. I sat down and I meditated and I really felt into, okay, what will happen? And I thought into a retreat that I was going to run over there. And I actually visualized myself into this retreat, taking these people, having a great time, and actually visualized myself getting caught by the banja, by the police there. And I could myself getting imprisoned. I visualized myself getting sent back to New Zealand. I visualized myself having parents be really disappointed in me, and my friends laughing at me. I visualized myself having absolutely no need to live at home because I don't have any money to live on my own or live with friends or anything like that. And just visualizing the worst of visualizing myself being alone and just getting so real with actually what the worst case scenario would be, learning to be okay with it. This is the interesting thing, because by me actually learning to be okay with that, now there's no fear needed, right? And this is probably a more challenging process, but for me at that point in time, because I was so scared of what was the snake in the room that I hadn't yet turned on the lights. Because if that had happened, I would still be alive. And remember what I said, the fear was if this happens, I will die. I changed that. I visualized the worst case scenario and I didn't actually die, even in the worst case scenario. So it's crazy that if I actually get real with the worst scenario as much as people try to avoid it, all I'm doing then, if I'm avoiding actually seeing what the worst case scenario is, this is where positivity is dangerous. If I avoid it, all of a sudden I'm running away from a dark room and I don't know what's in it. That's scary, getting really real with it, turning on and realizing the coil of hose that's in there is actually a snake in the room. Oh, sorry, the snake in the room is actually coil of hose, other way around. Anyway, yeah. So because now I'm really aware that, okay, that snake that I thought was in that dark room is just a coil of hose. Right, so I got really real with that and I started crying. And not in a way that I sobbed, but just tears started streaming out of just relief. Like, wow, even if this worst case scenario happens, I get fined all this money, my parents are disappointed, they don't give love to me, I'm just there alone, I'm at home, I'm not where I want to be, I'll still be okay. And I got so real with this sense of relief. Oh my God, I actually will be okay. And just coming to the reality of that. And in doing that freed me from that fear. And all of a sudden, the fear within 12 hours, a fear that previously would have just completely crippled me and broken me. So it's definitely a it's quite extreme. But yeah, just getting really real with the fact that there are definitely other processes and other approaches and ways that people can as well shift their experience with, with a specific fear or a specific trauma.
That's so powerful in so many different ways. So you talk about reprogramming, and we talk about, what happens, well, even just what has happened in your life up to the point of reprogramming. But how have you coped with the changes that transformation brings into your life? Every single time you actually do reprogram, how do you move forward? And those shifts in themselves, it's like they switch us onto a different path, or maybe an acceleration of the path, like those little like moving sidewalks in the airports and stuff. It's like, instead of walking next to the side, you get to hop on one of those. So yeah, in your own life, how has your practice, your mindfulness practice, everything else help you cope with the changes that each transformation brings?
It's an interesting question. I like it. So obviously the shifts that have happened have always been really gradual. There's been very rare circumstances like the one I explained with the visualization, or certain experiences where the changes have been more negative than positive, that have actually led to the change just more so being a relief, more than anything, rather than anything that I've needed to learn to cope with. But other than that, most of the shifts have always been gradual. So there hasn't really been any really like instantaneous shifts, like too many really, that I've needed to learn to cope with in particular. In fact, even if there had been, that would have just been more of a relief. The fact that, oh wow, there's this deeper sense of freedom in the space, than needing to actually learn to cope in a new way, because that was actually the way that I was wanting to actually be able to cope. The only thing I'd really say is really coming to a place where I get to celebrate that shift. Because if I don't celebrate it and I don't actually give myself time to actually destimulate the forebrain a little bit, and in doing so, that allows me to come to a place of rest, which allows me to come deeper neuroplasticity to actually, which in conclusion allows myself to come to a place where that plasticity is solidified and more in practice. So it's actually operating in my own brain rather than it's just there. Because just because a neuron is instilled in my brain doesn't mean it has multiple connections. So I might still have a memory per se of a jealous experience or a situation might be cheated on or whatever that is. It doesn't really need to affect me. So it still might be there. So the neuron's still there, but it just might not have many connections. And because it doesn't have very many connections, I have that thought of, what if she cheats on me? That thought doesn't have power because it doesn't have many connections. So it's a place of, okay, well, if it's about the connections of the neuron rather than the neuron itself, because the neuron won't just die. It'll just be, could die, but a lot of the time it's just going to still be there, which means I can still have that thought. It just means that I've shifted that thought. So it's coming to that place of, okay, well, if I want to shift my experience with that thought, I need a place of deep rest. To deep rest, I actually want to produce more serotonin in my system. And to do that, of course, there's many health ways, but there's actually a very instant we can do. And as we know, as many people are aware of now, there's gratitude. It's not gratitude in terms of just writing it down and asking it. It's actually this experience. So it's coming to a place where I can actually experience a feeling of gratitude. So if I might be doing a specific practice I was instructed to do, which it might be powerful, but if I'm not experiencing and feeling that emotion, try different ways. There's many methods of gratitude. For myself, just writing it didn't actually help me feel it. I actually needed to meditate at the start because I was like, what's this gratitude feeling? I don't know how to feel grateful. I was in quite a dark place once upon a time, and because I was so depressed, gratitude was an idea. I just couldn't feel grateful. People would say, feel grateful because you're in New Zealand and you're not some starving kid in Africa. I was just like, I just couldn't. I actually led to a place of me being even more. It's like, why can't I feel grateful? What's wrong with me? Mm-hmm. And actually came to a place where, okay, well, I can actually learn feel gratitude through other methods. So I tried that. And some methods that I learned were shifting what am I to why, meaning instead of it being what am I grateful for, what could I be grateful for? And then that bypasses a certain region of the allows me to come to the place of actually exploration and creativity, because it takes away from that place of a hippocampus coming into play saying this is not true. Because if I say I am, that's the sense of true. Because I didn't feel grateful if I said I am, my brain would say I'm lying. So it was very difficult for me to allow anything to be experienced. So ultimately, whatever thought I had, even if I had the gratitude thought, it didn't get brainstem, which means it wasn't experienced within my chemistry, my central nervous system. What didn't experience it. So if I want my central nervous system to chemistry to resemble that, the serotonin to be released, I need to experience it and to shift. Like I said, I shifted it to, okay, what could I be grateful for? Started exploring different things. Then I'd close my eyes. I'd listen to some music that I've had previous gratifying experiences with. And in doing that, that allowed me to finally stimulate that emotion over practice, over time. And doing these gratitude practices is probably the biggest thing that I've been utilizing a lot more, and I'd recommend as well, around actually solidifying new neuroplasticity, so new shifts in the mind, new programs, because that not solidifies it, but it resets myself, my system, so I come to a place of relax, and that me so that I can actually create more forward momentum, because forward momentum only have so much ability to momentum until I burn out, unless I take time to pause, unless I take time to reset, which is why we need to sleep, right? Which is why we need to eat, which is why we need to take time to breathe and pause. Otherwise, the mind, the brain will get to a place of what we call burnout, and the ability to produce norepinephrine is a stress response in the body that is actually helpful if it's paired with. So if I'm creating a shift in my brain and I'm producing norepinephrine, which means norepinephrine, sorry, I keep confusing the name. Norepinephrine, it's a very hard word to say. If I'm producing norepinephrine and I'm producing at the same time, because I've shifted my chemistry, I'm standing tall, I'm feeling strong, and facing a stressful situation, my brain will start to change. My brain will start to become plastic, meaning it's going to shift. It's going to be malleable, start to instill new neurons, new patterns, new connections. And then I come to a place of serotonin release. What happens is through serotonin release, and this is why SSRI is so popular, is because in doing so, that decreases the response in my body. It decreases the amount of norepinephrine, which is actually good, but on its own, it's actually quite harmful if it's on its own. What it does is, because a lot of people only have norepinephrine release without the dopamine release, they're in a place of stress progress. So it's more distress and not progress, and that's a bit of, because of that means that I'm actually in a space where I'm reacting, not responding, not creating, not making forward movement in a specific area. So what we want is we want to release the serotonin by practicing something like gratitude often. And by practicing something like, not only does it instill what I've been learning and into my mind, into my brain much deeper, it actually sets myself up, and it's been shown through various papers that from a place of more serotonin, higher serotonin, I actually increase performance, I increase my focus, and also I'm resetting and refilling those dopamine and norepinephrine so that I can actually create more forward momentum again from there. So that's definitely been one thing that I've been implementing more to actually help allow myself to implement the change rather than actually cope with the change, I'd say. So I'd say that's probably the biggest thing that I've shifted.
I love it. So obviously you haven't been, this knowledgeable and this mindful and
God, no.
integrated in these practices. And so what kind of goals and dreams have come to fruition because of your transformation into who you are today?
I'd say,
or who you've been for the last years?
I love that question, because it's actually been interesting. It's actually been almost the other way around in a way. as in those goals came up, which allowed for my transformation, which is a really interesting thing. Although the transformation has brought about like a couple of new things, like I'd always wanted to do retreats, and now it's just more clear. I'd always wanted to do a non-profit, now it's just more clear. I'd always wanted to do coaching, now it's just more clear, right? So these are just more crystallized in my mind with more clarity and more understanding because I've been them more, rather than it being something where I have been in a place of these goals have just suddenly come to me. And because I've had those goals in the past, it gave me the direction per se, so that I can actually forward momentum and progress. Because without that, at least some sort or somewhat clarity, because I didn't have that at the start, there was no forward momentum because there's no direction. So if I took a step, I was more likely to step because I thought that was forwards than actually to step in the right direction because I didn't know which way was forward. So once I had that goal of this is what I want to do, which I'll say what it is in a second, then it actually gave me that direction, which allowed me to. So it's been the other way around for me, and it's definitely been something that I want to utilize more, which is allowing myself to set a certain direction, even if it doesn't meet the long-term direction, which allows me to create full momentum in the direction that is actually going to serve me. And interestingly, so original, I'd say it's sort of happened hand in hand, but the original I actually had to start a party boat business and to become a fitness influencer, which is crazy, right? Like I was in San Diego, and my roommate at the time, my housemate at the time, he was filthy rich, and he had a boat. He's like, "Hey, Kiwi, you want to start a party boat business?" I'm like, "Yeah, that'll be great. Let's do it." Like I was drinking at the time. I was sleeping around the time. I was just unhealthy mentally at the time, and physically I wasn't too bad. But I was hormonally I was probably quite unhealthy, and inflammation wise is probably unhealthy as well. So from that place, because I started to realize that the goal that I'd created had come from a standpoint, not from a compassionate standpoint. That allowed me to actually shift into the idea of what do I actually want. And that's when I actually came away from this idea of, okay, am I doing this to get affirmation from anyone, or am I doing this for me? And the moment that there was even like a tinge, even like a speck of me thinking this is going to get affirmation from this person, that wasn't the goal that I wanted. Instantly, just cut it out. But no, I need to come away from that. Let's restart. What do I want? And then anything comes up again, any affirmation, if that came up, instantly, no, that's not what I want. Let's move. Let's take another step back. And I'd create space. Space meaning I'd come away from completely. I found a space of silence. For me, that was waterfalls, and just a space where I could just be with, not with people. And I came completely away from, okay, is this going to please anyone? And finally, I was actually I created all the space for myself, and I was spending a lot of time alone. I was living in Quebec, and I actually was on my Instagram stories, and my friend popped up on Instagram story. So through one of our mutual friends' stories, and it was just sort of a picture of and I miss you every day, Angel. And he'd actually committed suicide a few years ago. He was a really good friend of mine, and what happened was he'd committed suicide due to the anxiety he experienced. And I remember standing at his funeral a few years ago, 4 years ago now, and thinking, I just want to shift this. I'm going to do whatever it takes. And I hadn't really taken action on that. It was just sort of there. I'd sort of spent some time. I'd shifted the things that I was posting, so I was speaking more openly about my own mental health that I was still struggling with at the time. And I was speaking more openly about things I had gone through. Definitely shifted that, which is beautiful. However, I hadn't really taken action on it in terms of actually doing something to help shift this in the world in some way. And that's when I was in Quebec about maybe 2 years later, so almost 2 years ago. And when I was there, I saw his up, and it reminded me what I'd said to myself at the funeral of, I'm going to do something about this. And it was in that moment myself from the first history. And even like because I've been studying it for so long, so much about information is tied to mental health, about the neurology around mental health, around the chemistry around mental health, and just really diving deeper into that. And experiences around mindfulness, I'm like, actually, you know what? I'm going to take action on that. So that's actually where things started to shift. The goal started to implement itself into I'm going to a deep impact coaching role. I'm going to actually create a big nonprofit that is associated around community, meaning that it's going to be a community. It's going to be an organization where it has people that are or have experienced mental health issues at the location, so that when people actually rock up physically or through the app, whatever it is, they actually get to talk with people that are or have experienced mental health issues, which means that they no longer feel alone, which means that there's no space and there's no resistance to that, or there's less resistance, at least. There'll still be resistance, but there's less resistance to that approach. Whereas otherwise, sometimes when there's the decision to speak to a psychologist, psychiatrist, or even some mental health organization, there's sometimes that fear of they won't understand me, or that fear of I don't want to speak to them because that fear of I don't want to speak to them because it's not going to help, right? But if I have that place where I might be able to speak to someone who's also going through a similar thing to me, or will actually understand me because they've gone through or are going through a similar story, then there's going to be that less resistance, and that's what I'm about creating. That's why I've created the healing community, just to initiate that. But eventually I'd love to create a non-profit, and that's of course going to require a lot of work and a lot of finances. It's definitely the plan to get there.
Wow, that's powerful.
Yeah. So that's sort of direction was, and that initiated my work, and that's been there for the last about 2 years now.
Amazing. So how do you see your work impacting others now?
So now I see it resonating on a deep level, rather than it being something that this could be helpful, right? Because that's how it started out. Helpful, I might try this, I'll talk to them. And I started out with some groups and some one-on-ones. Now I'm back with a lot of group work. I find it more impactful when it's, and in the group work, there's this sense of co-elevation. And because there's a sense of co-elevation, there's this, when someone has an issue and they announce it, not only does it give permission for others to actually step into their authenticity, which is such an essential factor for healing, because that leads to acceptance and that leads to growth from that space. So if I don't get to the bottom of the barrel, I can't do anything about the bottom of the barrel. So it gives the people permission to do that. It gives people ideas and new perspectives on things, because now when someone announces, oh man, it's pornography addiction, or oh man, I'm really struggling with my relationship, or man, I'm really struggling with my business, and this is making me feel this way, bring up a lot of fear, or this bring up these ideas of overthinking, these assumptions, whatever that is, then the other person is like, oh, I struggle with this too. I feel less alone. And also now, because I'll be able to step into actually this person, the other person in the group who was not wanting to speak about their own struggle, also benefits from that. The beautiful thing about working in a group, plus there's a factor of now people are not only feeling supported because they're in a minded people, they're also in a place where they get to learn to be supportive with other people that are going through similar things. And by doing so, it's the most healing thing someone can do is when they actually come across someone that's going through a similar experience. And this is something that I allow in the groups. They step into the coaching role themselves, because I, at the end of the day, would love everyone to become a coach, because that means that everyone's sort of in a place where they are healing themselves and they're passing on their experience to others that need it, which is beautiful. And that's the idea, is I want that someone gets and in doing so, they learn to be coaching, be a coach themselves, so that they can not only, when they learn to coach someone else, they actually gain the ability to coach themselves. That's the idea with the work that, in the way the work that I do. The people that, yes, I am working with, for example, I work with a fantastic human. I won't say his name because of privacy, and he's quite a quiet guy, but he's a multi-marketing company at the moment, and he's 5 countries. Still, he's been struggling with fear, struggling with the state that I'm not good enough, I'm not earning enough money. And he's almost at 7 figures, it's insane. And struggling with all these frustrations around that. Yet now that he's been able to shift that just in the last 2 months, because we've been working together a short time, shifting a lot of that idea of coming away from these stories of I'm not good enough because of this. I'm so worried about X. I'm so worried about Y, and X or Y happens. That means I'm not good enough, right? So all these things that were coming up, because he's been able to move through a lot of that, he's been able to come to a place of deeper safety within himself, deeper security within, and less fear, which now not only means that he can think more clearly, he can perform at a higher degree. He also experiences happiness and joy and compassion within himself. And because he experiences that within himself, he naturally wants to pass it on to other people. So now in doing so, he went on, just after one session, within 4 hours, he went and hired like 3 new people, started 2 new projects. He tripled a guy over in Venezuela. So he had one of his employees over in Venezuela, tripled his income. He moved him from a place where he was living in a room with 7 people to literally having his place, and he was able to feed his family. So like things like that, that's what I see as the impact, the lasting impact that happens, where the people that I'll work with will all of a sudden become more abundant and more able to them as well. So it's a sort of flow on effect of the work, and that's what I'm passionate about. Yeah.
That's amazing. I love it. I was just going to ask you what you love most about where you are now in your life. So that sounds like it's definitely it for your business, but what about just in your personal everyday life? What do you love most about who you are and how you are now?
Yeah. So I'd say the first thing that comes to mind is deeper sense of internal stillness. So although in the past, even in Bali as well, I had all this physical stillness, yet the internal stillness isn't quite there. It's like when something happened externally, my internal vibration would shift to whatever was external. So that was reaction, right? It was trigger. It wasn't actually me being able to step into my own space, my own state, whatever that was. So I'd say there's a deeper ability to do that. And that's what I appreciate about the work that I've done, which is my ability to find a deeper stillness than ever before internally when things are going crazy externally, or then there's a lot of stimulus externally. Because it's a natural neurological experience to have when if I've been adjusted through my upbringing to be associated with fast-paced external situations, then the moment that I go into more slow-paced things, seem like they're moving very slowly, I get anxious. I'm operating at a different way than the people around me. Therefore, the fear comes in. So things feel wrong. Vice versa, if I'm adjusted to things happening slowly around me and my upbringing, then if I'm in any sort of fast-paced environment, I'll get fearful, I get worried, I get anxious because I feel like things need to move slower. So everything feels like it's moving so fast, chaotic and all that sort of thing. And that's just a natural experience. So when things are operating at a different frequency, if you will, or different vibration in some shape or form, different pace, then the internal experience is normally going to resemble some sort of friction to that. So I'd say the biggest thing for me has been that place of coming to that state, and it's 100%, but in such a much deeper way than ever, being at a state where I am choosing my own vibe, I am choosing my own freedom, choosing my own experience of what's going on within me and what's around me as well, and actually being in that place where I feel more in control than ever to do that.
Wow. I love it so much.
Yeah, thank you.
That's true empowerment there for sure.
Yeah.
So what are you doing with your work now during the pandemic, and what are you hoping for in the future, and how can people find your work?
Yeah. So the work that I'm doing now is intensive. So that's been initiated and will be initiating fully in about a week and a half, which is exciting. So I've been doing a lot of work with men recently around stepping into this state of into a healthy, balanced masculinity, stepping into that ability to not only be authentic and vulnerable within themselves, but adopt a deeper level of integrity, which means be in a place of self-belief and self-trust and self-respect. because integrity at the end of the day is a reflection of how much trust I have in myself, and how much trust I have myself is a reflection of my integrity. So if I, for example, tell myself I'm going to meditate 5 minutes every day and I don't, or I miss one day, whatever that, decrease integrity, I decrease self-trust, I decrease self-respect. I mean, a great example is if I say to you, Sarah, let's go meet at Starbucks at 10 a.m. tomorrow. I'm not there. I'm like, sorry, we'll do tomorrow. And you're like, okay. So we meet up tomorrow. And I would rather you show up at Starbucks at 10 a.m. again, and I'm not there still. If I continue, eventually you're going to lose trust, faith, respect in me. There's going to be some anger, like different people have different experiences there. However, it's coming to the understanding that we do that to ourselves. For every time I don't show up to myself, I'm losing trust, I'm losing respect, I'm getting frustrated at myself under the surface because I'm not willing to acknowledge it. It's happening under the surface, and the more that happens is what built up a lot of lack of self-trust. I couldn't trust my own word. I couldn't trust myself in an uncertain situation or a scary situation because I'd lost integrity. So a big thing I do with men is teaching them how to actually step into a deeper level of integrity, that they can build self-trust, self-respect, and so that they feel more confident in themselves, so that they can go out and and actually act on the decision they make, which is beautiful. So that's the work that I'm doing at the moment. And then also I'm very shortly going to be doing some stuff that I'm excited for, because up until about 6 months, 60 to 70% of my work was actually with women rather than men, which is real interesting. So it's only recent that I've actually shifted that. And I'm really excited to start working with women again. I'm going to do a small women's group of about 3 or 4 women and do a women's intensive and do a very similar aspect. However, it's going to focus on the balance between feminine and masculine energy. It's going to be definitely about a neuroplastic approach, stepping into the integrity, but in a very compassionate and light way. That is in a way that's going to allow for that shit to happen. So that's what I'm very excited for the work that's coming up. And in terms of what's going to happen in COVID, we've been very Auckland, in New Zealand rather. I'm in Wellington actually, but my hometown's Auckland. And in Auckland, Wellington, through New Zealand, to have this experience where COVID isn't such a big impact right now. We've been out a lot for a bit, and there's been certain challenges that have arisen here and there. We did have 100 days where we had 0 cases, and there was a second wave, but it's definitely been a lot more chill now, which is nice. And although these experiences have been happening, we've had a lot of here and a lot of flexibility here around that. So that's definitely allowed me to step into that opportunity of running this summer, which I haven't actually announced yet, but I'm very excited about the idea of running a retreat of just 8 people and taking them away for 4 days. And yeah, just really diving deep, doing some waterfall experiences, some meditation, some breath work. I can't wait. But yeah, that's sort of the work that I'm over this time. And people can find me Instagram, Coach Keza, so Coach Kezza. Excuse my accent. And so that's Instagram. They can also find my podcast, Pocket Coach. So if they just search Pocket Coach, as it sounds, on podcasts, they're in your podcast platform, iTunes, iTunes, same thing, Spotify and Stitcher, and just any think of Pocket Coach or Pocket Coach Bites. So Pocket Coach is interviews with people just like this, and then the Bites is just 2 to 10, between 2 and 10 minute little snippets of little short bites to focus on healing. So those will probably be the main places that people can find me. And finally, they can find my web, Healing with Kez, so healingwithkez.com. And on there is also the healing community as well. The healing library where people can find helpful practical tools that that are easily applicable there as well. So yeah, that's it.
Oh wow, your work is so powerful. I love it so much.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate that a lot. Honestly, it's been I've honestly rapid fired a whole lot of stuff because there's so much stuff I wanted to dive into, and you've had fantastic questions that's allowed for that. So I just want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to be on here. I really appreciate it.
Of course. I just have one last question.
Yeah, of course.
So it's my favorite question to ask.
Ooh.
I think it's a great one to be asked, but also for everybody listening to ask themselves. So the question is, who is the superhero inside of you that has all the power you could ever need?
Ooh. Who is a superhero inside of me? Has all the power I ever need. Life. That's the first thing that comes to mind. Life. So an interesting thing that has come through in the last sort of few months is coming to the deeper place of, okay, who is a me that is aware? Who is a me that is aware of these? Who is a me that is aware of these thoughts? There's a for that. And coming to that place of, okay, what's actually this deeper sense of life that's there? And being able to connect with that. Really learning through meditation or becoming meditative, being able to connect with that sense of life or that deeper energy of life, a deeper sense of awareness, which is me, which isn't my identities, which isn't my thoughts, which isn't my feelings, which isn't even my experiences, not my body, nothing. It's just simply life and being able to connect with that. So that for me is form. The highest place is the place that's not weighed down by thoughts, not weighed down by emotions, not weighed down by anything. It's not even defined. It's just simply a deep, vibrant space. And yeah, that's definitely me, the me that's connected with all life around me, the me that is not defined by anything and free.
So beautiful. Wow. Well, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story. I have so much gratitude, and it's been such an honor. I appreciate you.
Thank you, Sarah. I too. Thank you for having me on. Truly.
I want to thank you for listening to this podcast. I hope that this episode has somewhat inspired you to take control, given you the tools to feel secure and on fire in your own independence, and help to unlock within you the impact that you're here to make. You're not born with a purpose. You're born as your purpose. It's already inside of you, and it's your responsibility in this life to live that in the truest way possible. If you've gotten any sort of value out of this episode, please share it so that we can together expand our inspiration and our impact in this world.